Transfer portal wide receiver Elijhah Badger is announcing his commitment today, and I gotta say, I think he's Gainesville bound.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to, another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free reviews in the podcast and on YouTube. And I am Brandon Olsen. If you don't know, shame on you. If you do know, welcome back if you're an everydayer. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. And like I said, today Elijhah Badger is announcing his commitment to whichever program he's deciding to finish his college football career at. Elijhah Badger, of course, played his first few years at Arizona State and is now looking to leave that program that has gone through so much at the quarterback position. Just year after year, they change quarterbacks, and it's really a mess for Arizona State quarterbacks just every year. But Elijhah Badger, he visited, I believe the order was Washington first and then Arizona, and then wrapped up his Florida visit this week. And he's announcing his commitment today. We don't know what time yet. I've got to say, I think he has to be a Florida Gator. And I don't mean that as in like, I'm like so very confident. But from everything that I've heard, the main concern with Elijhah Badger was the medicals. Because, of course, going into this process, it was, hey, his back's been messed up. He had to go, I believe he got a surgery or two. He had to get some procedures done. Not sure how long-term that's going to be an issue. But then he came to campus. That was the big thing with the visit, too. With the visit, it was, hey, are his medicals going to check out? And from everything that we've heard back and multiple people, I sent it to the subtext group on I think Tuesday, maybe Tuesday night, Wednesday morning-ish, that Elijhah Badger's medicals came back not a concern. His grades, not a big concern. And so with that being said, I said this almost 2 weeks ago. Said this last week, said it earlier this week. Elijhah Badger, medical's good, grades good, get him to Gainesville. It's as simple as that. Get him to commit, and if you don't, it's a whiff. I cannot express how important of a need this is and how important of an addition this would be. Okay? And I brought up these numbers before, and as far as I'm concerned, they're a great selling point with Elijhah Badger. He fits what Billy Napier wants to do and what the Florida Gators offense needs right now from whichever receiver they choose to bring in. He's very successful on in-breaking routes, which we know if you've watched any Florida Gators game play, you're going to see that there's hitches, there's digs, there's crossers, and the screens are going to be here and there. Elijhah Badger has found success doing all of that. And if you go back to the Louisiana days under Billy Napier, and you go back to the 2022 Florida Gators, you will see an offense that likes to go vertical. 4 verts, like just straight up Madden, 4 verts, is a very common thing that Billy Napier has liked to do throughout his career. Didn't do it too much in 2023, but I firmly believe that was mostly an offensive line issue. Graham Mertz was a check down Charlie last year. I've said that before. And I don't think that he's really constantly looking for the deep ball, but I do think that's something that he likes to do. That was something that we talked about when he committed was, hey, he's taken those deep shots before when he's had time. It's about having the time to do it. And I think for him that he just knew he didn't have the time last year, so he was just checking it down and getting something. But you look at what Elijhah Badger did at Arizona State, 51.1% of his routes were in-breaking routes. Okay? Another 24% go routes. go balls. Okay. That's over 75% of his routes were in breaking or go routes. The routes that he's run throughout his career are routes that Billy Napier loves. Okay? Like that's a very important thing to talk about here, where you're not just going, bring in the best receiver in the portal. Like just bring in talent, like the stacked talent and figure it out later. You don't have to do that with Elijhah Badger. You're bringing in someone who knows what to do, who has done what he's going to be asked to do in Gainesville. Easy selling point there. 43.7% of his targets came on in-breaking routes, okay? He found a lot of success running those in-breaking routes. And I want to make it clear, 51.1% of his routes run were in-breaking. 43.7% of his targets came on in-breakers. The reason that there's even a drop-off there is because I forgot the percentage of screens, or let me pull up the percentage of screens that he ran. Again, thanks to our friends over at PFF for giving me the behind the scenes numbers there. But 16.4% of his routes run were wide receiver screens. Okay. 16.4%, 35% of his targets. Like that's where the drop off comes from his in-breaking routes run to his targets on in-breaking routes, because screens he ran it about 16% of the time, but you're getting targeted on like 92% of the time that you run a screen, because odds are maybe RPO in there. So you're getting targeted almost every time you run a screen. That's why screens not a huge part of his route tree, but a very large chunk of his target share, just because again, when you run that screen, you're probably getting the ball. So that's why his target drop off is an 8% drop from his routes run on in breakers to targets on in breakers, because the screens, I mean, he got targeted 20% higher there. Like that difference between his screens run and targets on screens. There's a huge drop. There's a huge drop there that changes it. His yards after catch ability, even if Graham Mertz does not get the opportunity to throw those go routes that we saw Elijhah Badger run and win on at Arizona State, you get to see someone with yard after catch ability for Elijhah Badger, not just underneath. 8.4 yards after the catch per catch for Elijhah Badger, 6.9 yards after the catch per catch if you remove passes behind line of scrimmage. Okay. And I think that's a relevant point, because if you're just going, oh yeah, he's got 8.4 yards after the catch per catch and 35% of his targets were on screens, then you're going to go, okay, yeah, no duh. A lot of his catches came behind the line of scrimmage, and he just picked those up. But no, still almost 7 yards after the catch per catch, removing those passes. So on go routes, on digs, on crossers, on hitches. 76.6% of his total yards came after the catch. And I said this last week or 2 weeks ago. Trey Wilson was 88.2%. Again, a lot of his catches came behind the line of scrimmage. And Ricky Pearsall was 38.8%, where almost none of his catches came behind the line of scrimmage. So there's that big drop there, or that big difference there. 38.6% of his yards came after the catch if you remove passes behind the line, and 26 missed tackles forced. Trey had 18, Ricky had 9. Like you're looking at someone who's very productive with horrible quarterback play. I made a joke last week, or maybe even earlier this week, about him playing with a Publix cashier at QB, basically. And someone made the point that, yes, Publix isn't in Arizona, whatever. Okay. My point being, he was not playing with D1 QB, power 4 QB caliber play there. And he was still being incredibly productive. But it's not just his individual skill set. It's what he brings to the offense as a whole that we'll talk about in a second. First, we're going to get a quick word from Game Time. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer that it gets to tip off or first pitch if you're a baseball fan. I told you guys that on Tuesday morning, I woke up, I bought tickets to go see Phillies at Mets. It was Tuesday. It was a 1 p.m. game, which I said weeks ago that I was like, hey, May 14th, I'm going to Phillies at Mets. I just don't know where I'm going to buy my tickets yet. And that game was an absolute waste of money. They were cheap tickets, sitting in the Coke corner. But man, that sucked. Aaron Nola threw a 2/3 of a perfect game. Horrible to watch. I got to see Jose Butto walk in 2 runs. That was really fun. It was a super fun experience to go sit there and watch that. Just want to say, yeah, I had a blast. I don't regret going at all. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. And like I said, I spent the past couple weeks talking about Elijhah Badger because, again, he's someone that this is my Keon Coleman from last year. Okay. Last year, when Keon Coleman hit the portal, I don't know if you remember. If you were an everydayer, then you do remember, or maybe you don't remember, but I did it. Okay. It's there. It's on YouTube still. It's on audio if you listen to audio instead. But it was December 2022, if I'm not mistaken, with Keon Coleman hitting the portal. And I was like, hey, this is a guy you go add. He fits what you want to do schematically. He's a dog. He creates yards after the catch. He wins contested catches. He gets open. He does all these things. And it was Keon Coleman again, was someone that I was pounding the table for. I want to say that I've had a pretty good track record, okay, of transfer portal players. You can go back to 2022, 2023. I've had a pretty good track record of saying which transfer portal players Florida should go after, and how they would fit and how they'd thrive. And again, Keon's like the guy that I think I've absolutely nailed it. Very early second round pick. If I'm not mistaken, he was like 33rd overall, maybe 34th. But Elijhah Badger is my Keon Coleman this year. The guy where I'm like, just go get him. He fits what you want to do. His skill set is what you need. Like, he brings it to the table. Outside of just individually what Elijhah Badger brings to the table, because football is the ultimate team sport, right? I think we can say that. Like basketball, you need one star and you're automatically like in competition. Football, the only time you can really say that is Cam Newton with Auburn. Everyone else on that team sucked, but like he just dragged them to the national championship. But even then, that doesn't work anymore. Like, that's just not a sustainable approach to football anymore. So it's ultimate team sport, which means when you bring in Elijhah Badger, you're not just getting a guy that wins over the middle of the field consistently, that creates yards after the catch consistently, that makes defenders miss consistently. That's not all you're getting. You're getting an upgrade to your entire wide receiver corps that makes the entire offense easier. Because if you have just Trey Wilson, then you have just Trey Wilson, right? You could double him. Khalil Jackson, not a good separator. You don't need to double Khalil Jackson. He doesn't separate well. He'll moss you. Like, I'll give you that. Khalil Jackson will moss you every time. Like, he does that great. But he's not going to create separation consistently. So you don't need to double him there. Okay? Chimere Dike, not dynamic enough to need to double. Anybody else in that receiver room, not dynamic enough to need to double. So Trey Wilson's your only option there to really need to double at any point. And even then, you can kind of make him earn it until he proves that he needs to do it, or until he proves that you need to double him. You can make him earn it. You can kind of go, hey, Trey, all right, let's see you actually create separation consistently downfield, and then we'll double you if we need to. Okay, so you can do that if you're defending Florida with just Trey Wilson. You add Elijhah Badger into the mix, though. And now, again, I think that he would probably replace Khalil Jackson on the outside. And then when you want to put Khalil Jackson on the field, you put Khalil on one side, Elijhah Badger on the other, Trey in the slot. You can do that because I do think DK will be starting in the slot this season. So you can have Elijhah Badger, Trey Wilson on the field at the same time. Who are you going to double? Because if Elijhah Badger is beating you over the middle of the field, which he will do, what, you're going to double him and leave Trey in single coverage? or even worse, leave him running open somewhere. Because don't forget, it's not just doubling someone is doubling someone. It's that when you want to double someone, you have to trade off. If you're doubling someone, that means that you're taking a defender either out of coverage or out of coverage. And by that, I mean they're going to have to change their assignments so that they can double actually. Or you take someone out of the pass rush so that you can have still, let's say, 7, 8 guys in coverage. You're going to take someone out of pass rushing there and then give Graham Mertz as much time as he needs. Not saying that you're going to cover him with a pass rusher, but drop a pass rusher into an underneath zone. Maybe send your nickel at whoever he's doubling with, whoever they're doubling with, Elijhah Badger, whatever it may be. You can't really double at that point because you will get beaten. So bringing in Elijhah Badger gives you that immediate top 2 wide receiver. And I say top 2 wide receiver because I don't care if you want to say it's him or Trey is number 1 or him or Trey is number 2. I don't give a damn. Top 2 wide receiver. Have that other argument all you want. But also, if Trey gets hurt, knock on wood, and you don't have Elijhah Badger, your receiving corp is what? Bad, right? The Florida Gators receiver room has a ton of potential, but they're all very young. Aside from Khalil Jackson and DK, the people that we expect to see somewhat consistently are still very young. So if you lose Trey, you don't have much experience depth behind them, right? And then we're going to see what? Khalil Jackson, DK, and Nate Mizell, Marcus Burke, Tank Hawkins we going to rely on? Like, you're playing a dangerous game there if that's the situation that you potentially leave yourself in. So it's not just about bringing in a good football player. It's about bringing in a good football player that makes playing defense against you that much harder. Because don't forget also, last year we saw it quite a few times where opposing defenses would kind of stack the box a little bit, or even if they didn't stack the box, they would defend Florida very aggressively, playing cover 1, playing cover 0, and sending extra defenders at you. A lot of times you can play cover 1, keep a hook zone underneath. They didn't do that much against Florida. They were like, all right, let's play cover 1, let's press, and linebacker, you're blitzing. Call that, and get through the offensive line, get pressure. Doesn't matter what we're doing in coverage at that point. And you don't really get to do that as much now when there's another receiver that you have to respect that can beat your man coverage. You kind of get to work around some things like that. Then there's also the conversation of if you bring in Elijhah Badger, that is your 86th scholarship. You can only go in with 85. We'll talk about who unfortunately might be out in just a second. First, we're going to get a quick word from FanDuel. It is win or go home time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bets, $150 that you can spend on money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. Make every dinger Tuesday count. This past one was easily the worst dinger Tuesday I've had of this entire season, which has been generally pretty profitable. I'm just going to say. Remember that FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. To wrap up today's episode of Locked On Gators, we are talking about Elijhah Badger, who's again announcing his commitment today. We don't know a time yet, but you're now stuck in the position of, if you bring in Elijhah Badger, that's 86 scholarship players, unless you can somehow convince him to also be a preferred walk-on like Cormani McLean, but I highly doubt that'll happen. That's going to be a hard sell there. But you're at 86 scholarships, which means that now you've got to find a way to get to 85 by the time you open fall camp. A few options that you can handle. We'll talk about one that I think might be the most likely at this point in the game, and that is Cam Carroll medical hardship waiver. Teams can get a medical hardship waiver for Cam Carroll and not have to spend the scholarship on him, but won't be able to play. and you do need to not be able to play. Can't just go, oh, like, because then teams could just go, oh, he's a redshirt freshman anyway. We're just going to finagle the scholarship. Can't do everything, right? You got to get a medical hardship, proven can't play, or proven won't be cleared in time. And then, if I'm not mistaken, then Cam Carroll would get another year of eligibility, which at this point, just being realistic, maybe looking at someone who's not going to play again. I mean, that knee injury that he suffered last year was rough. It's been something that the conversation's been going for a long time of like, oh, he'll be ready for spring. And then spring came and it was like, no. So Cam, we'll see what goes on with him. Hopefully he at some point finds his way back onto a football field. Would be ideal if that was the scenario that we can get there. You can look at the other very realistic option of maybe it's time to push someone out. If I'm not mistaken, grad transfers can still kind of skedaddle a little bit. You could also have the conversation of there are players on this team that have barely played, if they've played at all, last season and even the season before, where we already saw Florida take this approach of, hey, you're not a player at the next level. You're not really even a player at this level. Maybe we have a conversation about if you want to be a student assistant on the coaching staff, call your NFL career, NFL hopes, college career, call that a day. We free up a scholarship. You get a job as a student assistant. We saw Florida do this with Riley Simons a couple of weeks ago. Riley Simons joined the coaching staff as a student assistant, freed up a scholarship spot, which was then filled up with Jason Zandamela. But you can see a similar approach to that with, I mean, there's a few players on this roster that, and again, I don't like to name names, so I'm not going to name names, but there's a few players that you can talk about that, whether they are receivers in that same room that Elijhah Badger would be adding to, because again, if you're at the bottom of the receiver depth chart and you add Elijhah Badger to it, that means you're less likely to get playing time next year or this year, right? If you're already a veteran receiver at that spot, probably not going to play much, are you? Like things like that. You can even flip straight up to the defensive side. It doesn't matter where you clear up the spot. You need to clear a roster spot. So that could be an approach to take of, hey, you're going to be the student assistant this year. Like we'll get you as a student assistant. We know that you're not going to play the next level. You accept you're not going to play, because that's also the hard thing where you have to convince the player, or not convince the player, but the player has to accept that, yeah, I'm really not a guy like Riley Simons. Kudos to him, because I got to say, if I was a player, unless this was Riley Simons' decision, I have no insight on the situation. But if I was a player and someone's like, hey, we don't think you're a guy, you want to be a student assistant? I feel like that'd be a hard thing to say yes to. Just be like, damn, like don't even think I can contribute depth wise. I feel like that'd be a hard thing to talk someone into. But there's got to be guys on the roster that know they aren't players at the NFL level. Keep yourself as healthy as physically possible by burning that last year essentially. But there's spots, there's players here, and I know that it's not kind to go, oh yeah, like there's 85 guys, there's not 85 deserving guys there, whatever it may be. That's the nature of the beast. I cover the NFL draft and the New York Giants for Sports Illustrated. There's uncomfortable conversations to have. That's the not fun part about being a GM or running a team, is that you have to work with the resources that you have, and those resources are not unlimited. So whatever it may be, Florida, you can figure it out. Like that's really what it comes down to saying, is that I don't care how you figure it out. I know that there are ways to work around the scholarship limit. If that's, hey, you're going to be a preferred walk-on, but we're going to give you whatever NIL you agreed to, plus an additional however much to cover your room and board, your scholarship, whatever, like the scholarship that you would have had to, or that whatever would have been covered by your scholarship, whatever that may be. Like you could work around things and again, kind of, like I said, like finagle them a little bit to make things work towards your favor. You can do it. I mean, other teams do it. Other schools do it. This is college football in 2024. I envy nobody that has to deal with that stuff. But hey, I mean, it's possible. You add a good player, and it'll be uncomfortable to have that conversation that you've got to have to clear up that scholarship spot. You will forget that when you start winning football games and when you start the season 1-0 against the Miami Hurricanes. Just saying. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. We'll be back maybe later if Elijhah Badger does decide to become a Florida Gator. Saying, for Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country and NFL 33, and I will see you all next time.